Good evening and welcome to the Cedar Falls Planning and Zoning Commission for this Wednesday, August 28th, 2019. We have a roll.
Hagen. Here. Bartley.
Here.
Larson.
Here.
Beaver.
Here.
Here.
Saul.
Here.
Here.
All right, our first order of business is the approval of the minutes from the August 14th, 2019 meeting. Is there a motion or any corrections?
I do have a correction. In part 3, the third paragraph, the minutes as presented needs to be stricken.
Anything else? I'd entertain a motion to approve as amended.
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. At this time, I'd like to open the floor to any public comments for anybody who would like to address the commission on any item that is not on the agenda tonight, of a general nature. Seeing none, we'll move on to our public hearing. We have two public hearings tonight on the same item or same piece of land. Note that notice of the public hearing was published in the Waterloo Courier starting on August 21st, 2019, just for the record. And so our first public hearing is a land use map amendment on the West Fort Crossing location. And David, you're going to introduce this item, correct?
Okay, first I'd like to take a motion to open the public hearing.
Okay.
And then we'll close it after public comments and between public comments and discussion.
I'll ask for a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now we're open. We'll let you introduce the item.
Thank you, Mr. Holtz. Yeah, this first item tonight is a land use map amendment for a property, 119 acres of land in the western part of the city along Union Road. It's basically between Lexington Heights subdivision, Waterbury Drive, and Union Road. I introduced this item at the last meeting on August 14th, so I want to kind of go through those land use factors and changes, the proposed changes to this area. So again, the property's on Union Road. It's currently 119 acres in an A1 zoning district. As we look at the current land use map that was adopted in 2012 as part of the comprehensive plan, we take a look at some existing features, mostly comprised of low density residential. There's some greenways and water floodplains along existing floodplains and waterways in that area, which is identified as that green shade. And along Union Road, there's a neighborhood commercial area. So part of those characteristics with greenways, again, they're floodplain buffered areas. They can be identified as parks and open space areas, environmentally sensitive areas. That's kind of identified along the University branch of Dry Run Creek along the northern edge of this area. And then those can be also identified as your stormwater management areas for basins and drainage ways, and usually follow existing contours and other drainage ways in that area, and also identified as some trail systems through there. The commercial mixed use characteristics are basically low impact commercial uses kind of around your neighborhoods. And again, another key factor or part of this is could be used for upper floor residential. So that's kind of the characteristics of those two land use factors or areas in this area. So just kind of looking at the greenways here and kind of correspond those on the land use map with our floodplain. So the floodplain is identified in the aerial photo. And as you can see, the land use map really expands that out a little bit more. Really not needed in some of those other areas along Union Road. It's way outside of the floodplain. So again, with this, we kind of want to clean up some of those areas that are not in the floodplain and tie those back to the low density residential. So that's identified as that University branch along the north side of the site that kind of runs in a diagonal. It basically starts just north of this area and then heads east over to the detention basin north of the Unidome, and that flows under Hudson Road through the neighborhood and eventually makes its way over to the Cedar River. And also along the south side, there is a little finger of floodplain that actually follows an existing drainage way. So that reflects a more accurate depiction of the existing features, the lowland features, drainage ways that are identified in the land use map. So we kind of want to maintain those areas on the south end of it. So moving along, as we look at a proposed map, is we really want to kind of narrow up those greenways and floodplains just to reside in those existing basins and floodplain and drainage areas. Again, kind of retain some areas for open space, parkland, that could be factored into the development of this property and as that subdivision plat moves forward. Again, you're looking at surrounding parks, you're looking at Robinson Dresser and Birdsale Park north of the development, and those are more, the golf courses and ball fields. But actual neighborhood parks, there's really not anything located in the western part of the city. So that's a good opportunity for this area to create something in these greenways and something for the neighborhood. So really it's a change from those greenways to low density and then take that commercial area off of Union Road, change that to low density also, because there are other nearby commercial areas that we can use in this immediate area in the neighborhood. So moving along, we would, the Department of Community Development recommends approval to amend that land use, both of those features, greenways and floodways and neighborhood commercial to low density residential, subject to the staff recommendations and any comments from the Planning and Zoning Commission and public here tonight.
Thank you, David. Is there anyone from the applicant who would like to address the commission? Okay, thank you. At this time, I'll open the floor to public comment on this item. Anyone wishing to address the commission on this item, please come forward to the microphone and give your name and address.
My name is Mike Gersh. I live at 1608 Union Road, and I'm here to express my objection to the removal of the commercial, which is on my property. I've owned the property, my wife and I, for 25 years, and I want to leave our options open for whatever use could come along. I'm not against this new development, but just against the removal of the commercial on my property because it limits options in the future for sale.
Which properties are you? Are you just north or south of this proposed?
I'm east, west, just south of the New Aldea thing, the first yellow edge along Union Road.
So that chunk just north of the kind of the parcel.
Right. I'm in there with 10 acres. And the commercial could be light, maybe a dentist's office, maybe a assisted living center, maybe, a vet clinic, something, small and not disrupt the neighborhood. There's many of those along other busy streets like First Street or like Hudson Road. They don't have to always be on the corner, especially if they're not a real disruptive commercial thing like a gas station or something, but just something small that could go in there. So that's why I object, just to leave my options open. It's been there since 2012, and I have no plans, but I just want options left alone.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Anyone else who would like to address the commission? please come forward and give your name and address. Seeing none, I will close the public comment and actually we'll close the public hearing, correct? Had it in the right spot this time. And we'll move to bring us to the commission for a motion for discussion.
I want to put on the record that I'll be abstaining from this item.
Thank you, Brian. So both Brian and Winger will abstain on this item. So what is my question in light of Mr. Gert's request, what is the land use that is immediately north of that? Is that's some sort of commercial also? I can't tell.
The new Aldea development was changed to planned development.
Right.
So, and then there's a,
That's all.
Yes.
That's all RP, right?
yes, RP zoning, and then there's a little strip of greenways and floodplain between that and that commercial area. So I think I mentioned last meeting, the land use really doesn't follow the property lines, but it was kind of an attempt to kind of clean up some of these areas. So, you know, it's up to the commission to maybe focus more on this particular area and then, you know, maintain the existing land use. And as for future development, if something comes in, we can consider that at that time. If it's a low density residential, we can change it at that time. And if they want to keep the existing, the remaining commercial, I guess, on Union Road outside of this development, we can look at it at that time.
We can bring up the map again, show the map, the existing land use map on the street.
It's that little portion to the north
If-
of the,
If Jeremy can bring up the slide, yeah. Yeah, you can see that red box, so to speak, the rectangular on Union Road. The north end and the south end really extends beyond this proposed development and rezoning. So again, if we can just, if it's up to the commission, just focus on the rezoned area or the proposed project and just wait for the future.
I think we have to think about the long term and the reasons in the comprehensive plan, whether this is a good place for commercial to occur. And I think staff has looked at this and questions because we have two nodes at major intersections, one to the south and one to the north, where there's still some possibility, of course, with neighborhood commercial. So those are some of the factors to think about. You know, it's likely that we would want a piecemeal, you know, just little pods and nodes of commercial scattered across along the street. Now, it could be a small area that's, you know, it's reduced, but I guess I would suggest not trying to break that up and just have little segments of commercial that are split up.
I guess I'm sensitive to, I mean, he's owned it for 25 years, to making it more restrictive at this point, personally. I mean,
So maybe just reducing the area and not changing it for the area to the north, but changing the remainder of the area.
everything from the property under consideration south.
Right. That might be a better option.
have we heard from anything from the owner to the south of that?
A notice has been sent out to the meeting there. I've received no comments or any indication from the property owners along Union Road.
I mean, generally, the change in land use seems to make total sense to me because, the land use is not real accurate, like you talked about, relative to property lines to begin with, and so we always end up kind of, adjusting things when we actually get down to development to fit the actual property lines and things like that. So, in a global sense, I mean, it seems pretty straightforward to me. I mean, R1 is the least, least invasive use of all we can select, other than agricultural, which is not intended to stay that way. is, I'd be supportive of that, just, we have to, well, but like, to your point, Karen, I'm not sure that it's a really good location, you know, for a commercial development, but, you know, taking something, Brad's point, we're taking something away that's there now, so.
I would agree with you. I would move to approve with that change.
I just had one quick question. When, at,
So
oh,
we got a motion, is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's seconded, okay, further discussion.
excellent. So I just had a question. At the future approval of subdivision plats, that would be the point where we would request parks and green space, or would this be the point where we would want to talk about that?
Well, I think anytime you're changing the land use designation on the map, I think any comments that you have about the future use of those greenways and spaces, I think just to put it on the record, if you're interested in discussing that, it's certainly appropriate to talk about that at any point in time here tonight.
Excellent. That would be something that I would be very interested in including in the future plan of this space, is just to include some parks and green space.
Are you suggesting is there a different designation here, or just to make sure that we note that in the record that the greenway could double as parkland?
That's what I'm torn on, because the greenway, since it's on the edges, I'm wondering if it would make sense if there was a central park area to serve all of the units that will be in this area. Just because you have Birdsall, but that's quite a ways from this area, and then you have the development with Wild Horse that could be really well served by a public park in this area, even if it's a small one.
So then we would take a chunk out for public, or we make the developer put in a park? That's the question I don't understand here.
I think what we're talking about here is the future land use map amendment, so it is generally a vision for the future. If we can show that map one more time, Jeremy. So if you think about this whole area as a future neighborhood, not just the area that's in the red box here, or the white box that's being proposed for changes, but think about that as an entire neighborhood, all the way from the street to the south to all the way to the north. That central greenway does kind of cut through the center of the neighborhood. So, you know, being able to do something that's efficient and affordable and centrally located for green space and open space for the community does seem appropriate. And I think that's why David mentioned that, you know, it's a good opportunity to marry with, since there are existing green features in the neighborhood, but setting aside enough land there along the greenway that it's not just the floodplain, but maybe some opportunity for some usable neighborhood park space, just should be, you know, maybe would be noted.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I understand noting it, but then if that's a note, and that's the land usage that is required if we vote that way, then does that require the developer who owns that land? How does it affect what he does on that land?
I think just as the neighborhood is developed, then I think every developer looks at the piece of land that they have and tries to design the subdivision and the future neighborhood so that it includes all the elements of a healthy neighborhood. So there's a lot of developments that come into the city where they've married open space and parkland with green features. It's not setting anything in stone about, you know, a specific place that has to be set aside for parkland, nor does it mean that that can't occur with negotiation with the city about, you know, whether it's parkland or just open space that's usable for the community as a greenway. You know, that's all to be determined, you know, when the actual development comes in for consideration.
Oh, I just think it's worth noting that, because when a developer buys a piece of property to develop with the idea of, I agree with the parks and all that sort of thing, but it's a cost then too, because if you're taking land away from, so I think we need to be specific then at that time.
Right, so what's on the table tonight is changing the land use map designations, and then the subsequent discussion also could be relevant to your question here, and that's changing the it's rezoning the property from use for agriculture to then to allow residential development. And so that would really be probably the more appropriate place to talk about the needs caused by the rezone, the upzoning basically from the current zoning, which is agriculture, to residential. And the needs caused by that upzoning then could be something that's considered a need for the neighborhood in the future. So maybe we can have that discussion more during the rezoning hearing.
Right, because the land use map, I mean, what we're talking about, the changes, doesn't preclude parks in any part of what
Right.
we're,
And
land use, right? You
Correct
know,
me if I'm wrong, David, but the comprehensive plan does talk about greenways as being features that can be used for neighborhood open space. So I think the language is already in our comprehensive plan.
Right.
Talking about greenways and,
But I think you're right. I think now as we talk about either the rezoning or specifically plating, you know, that item would
right,
be
but
addressed.
yes, it would be appropriate during the rezoning hearing.
Yep, okay. Any other comments?
I think the change to the plan makes complete sense. I just want to clarify that the motion that we have is to change the plan, amend the plan, with the exception of the areas
To the north.
outside, to the north and to the south, or just to the north?
Just to the north, I believe. Is that correct, Leanne?
Yes.
That was your motion?
Okay.
Is there further discussion?
Was there a second on that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Atkins. See no further discussion, we'll go ahead and vote. And we have all ayes on that with the one abstention from Wingert. So that motion carries, and that will, well, I guess that's the first part of our business there.
We will set a date for public hearing on the land use with the council here upcoming in the next meeting.
Okay, you know, probably the next meeting then, okay. And then on this same piece of property, we have a rezoning from A1 to R1 for this West Fork crossing public hearing, and I would entertain a motion to open the public hearing on this.
So moved.
All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
That motion carries, so the public hearing is open, and David, I'll have you introduce this portion of it.
Thank you, Mr. Holtz. Again, this is a rezoning request of 119 acres from A1 agriculture to R1 residential on the same property there along Union Road. So basically, when we look at a rezoning case, we look at does it agree with a future land use map and comprehensive plan, as we just discussed. Is the property available to sanitary sewer service? And does the property have adequate roadway access? So we're going to go look at those criteria now. So again, as we look at the land use map, based on our previous discussions, we'll move forward with those recommendations, basically changing those greenways and floodplains to low-density residential, and that section of commercial within this property and south of the property to commercial, or from commercial to low-density residential also. So with a low-density standpoint, that's typically 1 to 6 units per acre. There was a question last commission meeting about population and growth of the city, and this area, you know, along the western edge of the city, and then, as you notice, along the southwest and southern edge of town, within the residential component of that, you know, this is all a blank slate. It's ready for development, and what we look at for, or I should just kind of summarize the previous census takings that we've had in the late 90s or the 90s and 2000s. You know, we grow at a very low, modest rate of 1.5% to 1% per year. So we're roughly around 41,000 people. So that's really 200 to 400 people a year. And that's really spread out through the whole town. So again, you're looking at these western portions of town and southern portions of town, as well as those infill areas and existing some more central areas of town. So that population does disperse and spread out, but you'd see a lot of more focused in these areas of undeveloped land or ag land as we have now. So again, the projections for future growth, again, it really shows that growing at 0.5% to 1%, you know, in the next 5 to 15 years, getting up to 45,000 people, you know, by 2035. So we do a lot of that projections, population projections, when we develop our transportation network, see where all the future roads are going and how existing roads handle that capacity as that population grows. So that's just kind of the population in a snapshot here for Cedar Falls. So again, this area is prime for growth. It is existing ag land, and we'll probably see more projects as that comes along. So again, when we look at the zoning, we have to match the land use, so the commission has to support that land use map amendment as we previously did to move along with the zoning. With the sanitary sewer, there's an existing sewer line that again runs down through that University branch of Dry Run Creek. And as that sewer line was installed, it does require a tapping fee based on an acreage. So as development occurs in this area, if that sewer is connected into this area, there is a tapping fee for that, and that's based on ordinance and when that sewer was put in years ago. So the 119 acres does develop or support that existing sewer line that runs through there. Basically, everything's going to be flowing through that property to the north. Again, that's utilizing your existing topography. You want to look at drainage ways for the flow and the stormwater detention and sewer in that area as this area is platted and developed in the future. The water main runs along 12th Street and Union Road, and again, those require connection fees as that water goes in, as the water was installed back then. So when we look at platting, we look at connection fees for water and sanitary sewer down the road. Adequate roadway access, you know, we take a look at the entire 119 acres and make sure we have existing connections through existing neighborhoods and surrounding developments. The existing arterial roadways does support the proposed development, and that's the arterials of 12th, Union, and 27th Street. And those basically collect the neighborhood streets within the development out to the arterials. So again, the neighborhood connections, very important to have that flow, circulation in and out of the development. We don't want to isolate this area from surrounding development, so we look at existing streets of Waterbury there on the west side, east side, and Cross Creek Drive, that little extension off the south side of Waterbury. So that'll tie into this neighborhood. And then again, we look at those surrounding areas. Does it go, we need to have connections to the east, and that's a UNI property, and the proposed or future school is going to go located near the southeast corner of this, so we want to have connections to the south. Those connections are important to the school. You know, you don't want to funnel traffic out of the development back into the school, so we want to have nice connections from the neighborhood to the school area, and again, along Union Road and other adjacent properties, as they may not develop now, but it does provide a placeholder in the future for existing streets as those properties come up for sale, and it's going to change, you know, down the road. So again, getting those connections in all directions. We want to have that efficient delivery of services. That's, you know, your public services of garbage, snow removal. Want to make sure emergency vehicles flow in and out and have adequate access to those areas. We use current roadway design standards as those plats are developed, make sure they meet certain city specifications. And then, again, as this development, this whole area develops in western Cedar Falls, we want to continue to monitor that traffic and growth patterns to make sure those arterials and roadways can handle those future projections of daily traffic in that area. So as it was mentioned a little bit in the land use discussion, this is basically a blank slate. It's an upzoning from residential, from agriculture to residential. It really starts the development process. So we really have to look at the change of use of the property and what we want to take a look at in look at future plans and developments, and we want to make sure that reflects some of these key features listed in this area. So this is going to be a new subdivision, so we want to make sure that all these areas or all these elements are there. We talked about parks and open spaces, and make sure it's adequately drained and you have provide enough storm sewer and detention from the subdivision. The high school there is located down the southeast corner of the site, so that factors in this whole area, as well as the 240-acre parcels south of this along 27th Street. So that will tie into this development in the future. Again, neighborhood parks, open spaces, that serves that area as well as surrounding neighborhoods and meets the needs of the future population. Trail connections, like to have a trail running through here. Planned connection could run along or connect into the Union Road Trail that's planned here next year, and that's from 12th down to 27th. So that'll create a nice loop in western Cedar Falls from 1st to Hudson to 27th and 12th, and then basically tie back into those neighborhoods. So again, we want to make sure this neighborhood layout as this comes along for platting accounts for the existing drainage patterns and stormwater features with adequate detention and make sure that's designed appropriately as it fits within the topography of the land and factors into those drainage ways and floodplain areas. So other factors, again, the R1 rezoning is a logical extension from other R1 zones in the area. Again, it's low density residential. That's the intent of the development. The rezoning is the first step in the development process. So then we move forward for the platting of the property. As part of the platting, we do take a look at the stormwater review and make sure that accommodates all the new stormwater, the existing stormwater from the site, how it collects from adjacent sites and flows through the property, and just for the fact that it can impact those existing adjacent neighborhoods. So that's a key factor in the subdivision or the preliminary plat is that stormwater review. So with that, we'd recommend approval of the zoning change from A1 to R1 residential to conformance with the staff recommendations and comments from the Public and Planning Commission.
Thank you, David. And Brian, I didn't give you a chance to note that Wingert is abstaining on this item. Does the applicant want to address the commission on this portion? Please come forward and give your name and address.
My name is Jonathan Klein, work with ISG to help the developer with this. I guess a couple clarifications may help this process. A couple things with the population size. I know that this Cedar Falls is growing pretty quickly. Maybe not that is maybe more than 1% due to UNI's admission rate falling, and a great neighborhood for the future families and things that would come to Cedar Falls. Some other things with parks, greenways, spaces seems to be a pretty major factor. Parks are planned to be incorporated in this subdivision. Plan to use greenways as much as possible. Some issues we're finding with maybe defining what our park space needs to be is the city's ordinance doesn't lay out any criteria on what amount of land we need to set aside for something like that. So looking for additional maybe information from the city regarding that. Trail systems, or planning on connecting to any future trails, especially connecting to Union Drive and back to 27th Street in the future, along with connecting to the future high school and as well as the UNI trails. Some stormwater issues, I know is always a big issue. We plan on meeting all every city, state, federal regulatory codes, or with that, also possible conversations have happened with DNR and to maybe connect with Lexington Heights pond. I know they have issues. It's an undersized basin that maybe we could even help the community by adding our detention basin with that and expanding that pond. As far as streets, I know that doesn't really get brought up until the planning process, but everything the city's pretty much stated so far, we are planning to meet all of those things. So I guess that's what I have. Any other questions, please let me know.
Thank you. At this time, I'd open to general comments from anybody or one of the public who would like to comment on this rezoning request. Just come forward and state your name and address.
Mike Gersh again. I have no objection or anything, but I just have a question. My land is agricultural, and I raise hay there and have for over 20 years. A couple of years have been corn or beans, but I want to continue it for right now. And so I didn't know if this rezoning from agriculture will affect my property.
Right now, yours, we understand your property is not included in this request.
Okay, well, and I am a little bit concerned about the water because quite a bit does flow through my property, so I'd want to not have that increased or anything.
Sure, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Anyone else who would like to comment on this rezoning request? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for action or discussion.
Seems like an appropriate change. It's where these properties are going. That's how they're changing, so I certainly would support it.
I would agree.
I would agree as well. I'd make a motion to approve the rezoning amendment.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion?
From the city's perspective, what are the requirements for park set aside? Because I also don't know. If they are to set aside land within the greenway, is that sufficient? Or will they be required to set aside more land?
So he's correct that there is a clause in the subdivision code about setting aside adequate open space to meet neighborhood needs. So I think at the time of subdivision, we would take a look at what their proposal is and really consider, whether that's appropriate. And, we just work, like with any subdivision design, we'd work with the developer on that design and try to meet all the code requirements in the subdivision code. But there's not a specific numerical calculation in our current code about the comprehensive plan does. And the parks plan also has some definitions of what a neighborhood park is versus something that served, the larger area of the community. And what we're talking about really here is serving the needs of the future population of this particular area. So it's likely to be fairly small. Neighborhood parks are defined in the as being just a 1 to 3 acre size, so fairly small. So it could fit into the needs, basically for the people that live there.
I guess as we think about the next step, I would encourage the developer to consider the the traffic for the development that's going to happen there with the high school. You're going to be a beneficiary of being next to that. I think there's also some responsibilities that go along with that as you think about that. I think, Eric Road is a good example as it goes out to Ulrich, the new elementary school. And
Right.
it really is it's an arterial, but it's not designed as one.
Right.
With a bunch of,
We don't have that.
I don't think you want that condition. So let's think about that carefully as you move forward, but looks like a good project.
Further discussion? We have a motion to approve the rezoning request R1. Go ahead and vote. We have all ayes with the Wingert abstention. So that motion carries. So is that on the same track as the land use, David?
Yeah, both the land use and rezoning, we have to set a date of public hearing, so we'll do that on the next council meeting, and then we'll have the public hearing later in September.
Great, thank you. We have no old business tonight. Under our new business calendar, we have our first item is 311 Main Street, the pump house facade review. This is an item that I have a potential conflict of interest on, so I'll be abstaining from the discussion on this. So I'm going to pass the chair to Vice Chair Leeper on this item.
Thank you, Marty. We have a request to approve a central business district overlay site plan for new facade improvements at 311 Main Street. I believe, Iris, you're going to kick us off here.
Yes, thank you. So, as you noted, the owner of the pump house at 311 Main Street is requesting a site plan review for a proposed facade change to the front of the storefront, and it really comprises of two portions of that, two aspects. One being replacing the storefront windows with garage doors, and the second being installing a new awning over the recently approved sidewalk cafe in front of the business. The property is located in the 300 block of Main Street in the downtown and does fall within the Central Business District overlay. As such, this type of facade change does trigger review by the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. So that's why we have this in front of us tonight. So on this slide is an image of the pump house facade as it is today, along with the image of the proposed change that was provided by the applicant. As I noted before, the applicant is proposing to remove the 3 storefront windows, the 2 existing mullions shown in the current facade, and replace them with 2 glass doors, install 1 new mullion in the center of the opening. Just a note that the proposed image does not include the proposed awning, which again will cover that sidewalk cafe that was recently approved by City Council. But I do have some images later on that I can show you of what that will look like. So I just want to give some background information on this site, as I know it came up in our discussions with staff. So the property was built in 1893, and there have been a number of substantial improvements to this building over time. The most recent was in 2007, where it was I guess a major exterior and interior renovation, which resulted in what you see today. So during the 2015 historic inventory, because of the number of changes to the facade, it was deemed non-contributing to the downtown historic district due to those changes. So just some background there on the history of the site. So first I will go through the 2 different aspects. I'll go through the garage doors, and then after I'll go through the awning. And as is a unique case, I think both warrants discussion probably separately. So, but again, I'll touch on one and then the other. So the Central Business District does have a number of review criteria when considering a facade change. These criteria are outlined on this slide. The items in red are the criteria that staff analysis has determined that these elements of the proposal for the garage doors does not meet. And the items not in red or not highlighted in that sense are either met or do not apply to this particular request. So first, I'd like to touch on actually three of them at the same time. There's a lot of overlap. So I'd like to talk about proportion, architectural features, and pattern. So the current facade, I'm going to switch back to the previous image so you have a comparison. The current facade has three large, well-proportioned windows that are separated by two mullions. And then for those like myself, I just learned this architectural word. A mullion is the kind of that structural feature that you see between the windows. So those blue kind of vertical lines between the open window spaces. So they have these mullions that correspond with the architectural design of the knee wall. So you'll see those panels below. They're matching kind of indents underneath those windows that line up. So symmetrically, the entire design of the building was put together to be consistent in that sense. So as noted, the applicant is proposing to replace these windows with two garage doors, which would include removing those two mullions and then installing one new one in the center of the opening. Large display windows in general are ideal for allowing unimpeded views into the interior of buildings, which is ideal for all types of retail and restaurant uses, and is actually the most important element of building design when you're looking at storefront design. Staff understands how operable windows could be an attractive feature for a restaurant during summer months. However, changing out the classic storefront window configuration with modern glass industrial garage doors would be a substantial change that is not really in keeping with the historic character of the building or the district, and may make the storefront space less attractive to future uses aside from the restaurant or bar scene, simply because you would lose that transparency that generally you see in the traditional storefront designs. The proportions of the garage doors that are being proposed do not fit into the existing proportions of the facade, and do not align with those panels that I mentioned to the knee wall. So it would disrupt the architectural features and design of this building, and are not consistent with traditional architecture that are shown in this building and in the surrounding. Staff has encouraged the applicant to explore other options. And there are examples, and I have a slide later on with some, for either swivel windows that will then kind of open up within the existing openings, or there are windows that slide open as well. And that would maintain the large expansions of glass that are typical of storefronts of this nature. And it would be in keeping with the storefronts traditionally found within our downtown and the architecture of this neighboring buildings. It's for this reason that staff's position that the design review criterions of proportion, architectural features, and pattern are not met with the proposed garage door of this application. Looking at roof shape, pitch, and direction, as well as building composition, we're not really changing the actual structure of the building. The roof shape isn't really being touched. The roof isn't being altered in any way. And then building composition is talking about, general walls and door openings and such. So again, not being altered, so not applicable to this review. Windows and transparency. Although the proposed garage door does have glass lids, the many new solid breaks in the proposed garage door make the structure less transparent than the existing design. The code does require that a minimum of 70% of the storefront between the first 2 and 10 feet of the building be clear and transparent glass, again, following best standards for storefronts in shopping districts. And the current storefront does appear to be right at that required percentage of glass. So reducing window coverage on a storefront in general is highly discouraged. Materials, texture. The proposed garage door will be made of aluminum steel and rail frame, which will have full view glass in between. The materials proposed in this particular design would be compatible with the material percentages allowed in the district. So materials, that requirement was met. Color, the applicant is proposing that the aluminum frames of this garage door will be black. This is a neutral color that is consistent and compatible within the district, so color-wise that works. Similarly to roof shape and building composition, the building entryway is not being changed, a mural is not being proposed, and signage will not change for the building. So those three items are not applicable to this case. So I just want to make a quick note that staff is not opposed to the use of glass garage doors in general. This type of improvement is perfect for old manufacturing or intensive commercial buildings that are being repurposed. Also for new buildings or storefronts that are retrofitted on the side streets or streets not intended for primary retail locations. Here are some examples. One, as I mentioned before, kind of a swivel window, that would be an option. And then here's an example of the side of a building along an alley that was retrofitted into a bar. So a location here, again, not on a main stretch, not historically or designed traditionally to be a storefront. This type of use of a garage door of this nature would be appropriate in a case like this. However, in this particular case, the proposed garage doors, again, are not compatible with the existing features of this building or the character of that classical storefront buildings along Main Street. And again, so those are some examples. So that would be the first half of the proposal. The second half is looking at an awning. And it's proposed that this awning will be 10 by 20 feet, gray, lightweight canvas. And the awning will be mounted on the building above 10 feet above the sidewalk, so right beneath the sign band of the building. And will extend 10 feet over the sidewalk to cover most of the recently approved sidewalk cafe. So here's a visual of kind of how that would come out into the sidewalk. So the picture that I have here for you was the picture actually submitted and approved by council of the sidewalk cafe. So you have, maybe with the mouse I'll trace a little bit, it's kind of hard to see. You have the building front here as if you're looking at it straight on. So you have the door and then the existing windows. And then when you hit the sidewalk, that's where it kind of changes to aerial or bird's eye view. And you have the sidewalk, and that it does come out an angle in front of the store quite a bit. So he's proposing, or the sidewalk cafe is kind of at an angle and follows the line of the street. So actually the proposed awning doesn't cover all of it. It would come out again 10 feet and cover a portion of that approved sidewalk cafe. At the point of full extension, the awning will have a clearance of 8 feet off of the sidewalk, which does meet the minimum clearance requirements of our code. So in general, awnings are common in our downtown, but this is really the first of its type and scale proposed in the district. And it is unique because it's the first time we've actually had one proposed over a sidewalk cafe. So it does bear some discussion from the commission. Standard practice in the past is that a projection over the public right-of-way is limited to 5 feet or half the sidewalk width, whichever is less. However, again, this is the first time of one of this nature has been proposed, and with the sidewalk cafe there, it wouldn't really impede anybody walking by the store. So staffs, and they're meant to provide shade and weather protection. And in general, we did some looking, and historically large retractable awnings are commonplace for storefronts. Staff is of the opinion that this type of improvement would be or could be appropriate as long as a few criteria are met. One being that if the sidewalk cafe were ever to be removed, that awning be retracted to 5 feet to meet the standards elsewhere within the district, or that it be taken down. Of those two options. Another criteria would be, again, since it's the first of its nature, that the applicant would work closely with our building official to make sure that it's mounted safely and that it can bear wind loads. We don't have it falling on people eating below, or just making sure that it's safe and properly mounted. Here is an example of a storefront in our district that has a retractable awning. Again, at this point, just at 5 foot, but you can kind of see it's rolled up here. So we do have examples of other retractable type awnings within the district. So with that, I'd like to open up for discussion, and we really have 2 recommendations. One for the garage doors. Staff is recommending denial of that portion for the reasons discussed in the presentation and outlined a little bit more detail in the staff report. And then the second half, we are recommending approval of the awning at 311 Main Street with the stipulations I just walked through. I do know that the applicant is here today and has some comments and is able to answer any questions too that you may have.
Thank you, Iris. Would the applicant like to speak to this issue? Please state your name and address.
Good afternoon, sir, people.
I'm Jonna Peterson, and this is Bruce Peterson.
Bruce Peterson.
And we both reside at 1607 River Bluff Drive in Cedar Falls.
I'd like to make one clarification. When this proposal was originally designed, it was designed with one garage door. The idea of making it two was to appease the review committee because they wanted to see if there was something else that could be done that maybe would be better for, I guess, the review committee. So our real proposal is to go with one door. However, we can do two if it's passed. We feel that this is kind of a new trend that's not only, it's going around other cities, it's kind of a vibrant feel. You feel that you're with the outdoor cafe, you feel like you're outside, but you feel like you're inside, and it's kind of both ways. It's been recommended. Jonna, why don't you read that?
Carol Lilly had, I don't know if this was in a packet that you received or not, but had written a note, an email to Brandon with Christie Door Company, trying to explain her position on this. So I'll just read what she said. She said, "Hi Brandon, I really like and support the concept of garage door type openings in restaurants. Our design committee members are supportive as well. Creating a vibe customers are seeking is important to the success of our businesses. Part of the vibe is also the historic nature of the district core. I thought I should make you aware that downtown Cedar Falls has an overlay ordinance which is different than other parts of the city. The ultimate goal is to enhance property values within the city and develop a distinct historical personality that is visually harmonious with surrounding sites and structures. The purpose is to maintain the district's historic significance while encouraging individual identity within the established framework. Creating that individual identity seems to be where you are coming from. Again, we love it. My intent in reaching out to you directly is to help you gain a better understanding the ordinance and identify ways to help your customers meet their goals in a timely, efficient manner. I blind copied the business owners you are working with so they are aware I'm reaching out. I want to be clear that Community Main Street is supportive of both the wishes of the businesses and the goals of the ordinance. Finding a way for those to match is a win-win. Also, the Community Main Street's Design Committee is a resource for business and property owners for guidance through the city's review process and is a free service." And then she goes on to say that she'd be happy to meet with him if he had any questions. As far as being in the historic district, we love being a part of the downtown historical, district, but there also needs to be balance. The public likes to stay on trend with fresh new ideas and concepts, and we're trying to give them that. And we're trying to stay current and relevant in an ever-growing market. And like Carol, she stated it very, very well in that email to Brandon, and obviously is very supportive to the extent that we've received a facade grant to help with the costs associated with this. And I think one thing that definitely needs to be stated here is this is not irreversible. Anybody that would come later after we would be gone from the building can definitely reverse this. And I don't believe that we would be reducing window coverage at all, especially if we went with one door.
Okay, anything else? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any public comments related to this issue? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the commission for comment.
I think this is awesome. I think it's, and I think the building is a great opportunity to do something like this because it's not a, perfectly preserved architectural masterpiece, and any of the architectural elements that make it blend in with the downtown area are kind of the framework of the outside of the facade. So this kind of uniquely has a recessed area or a niche, which where these 3 old windows and mullions are. It's funny that the single garage door got brought up because that was going to be one of my questions or suggestions for an improvement, that a single garage door would look more natural in that place. I just kind of assumed that there was maybe a structural requirement for that one center mullion, which in my subjective opinion kind of does upset the balance of it. When I first heard the proposal, my first questions were more so about the awning and less so about the garage door. My only question was what the color of the awning was going to be, mainly out of curiosity.
Gray.
Okay.
The awning will be gray.
I agree with Kyle. Nashville's about as historical as it gets, and they have a lot of garage doors, and it's fun. You go to Des Moines, West Des Moines, it's everywhere. And I agree also that a single garage door makes more sense to me than a double. So that's where I sit on it, and I think we should do it. I think it's high time we do some of that in our downtown.
I was initially torn on maintaining that historic sense of the building, but I was trying to envision how the swivel windows would work, especially if you have an outdoor cafe. I just don't feel like that would work. It would go into the cafe. And then I'm not sure how sliding glass doors would, if you switch to windows, I just don't think that would work either. So I think really the only option is this garage door, and I think that really gives a personal identity to Pump House and some variation to Main Street, so.
And I think it's worth noting that this type of extruded aluminum door essentially is storefront window. I mean, it's the exact same thing. The only difference is there are brakes and hinges in it that allow it to retract. For the question of being borderline on the actual code requirement, which is something we definitely need to be mindful of, I should think anyway that a single door would allow that little extra headroom in the calculation of that clear space. Another question that I forgot to ask earlier, I kind of assumed that the glass was going to be clear. Is that correct? Yeah.
I agree with having the single garage door because I really do think that the single garage door opens it up more and provides more of that transparency that I know that we seek in that area. And I also think that it's complementary to the cafe, the outdoor cafe. I think that that it just offers more of a consistency and more of an opening for this building. And it is true. I don't think that it's something that can't be reversed later on by, future owners in the near future or distant future. So I would agree. One door is better than having the two split.
I think it's a great idea. I don't love the implementation of it, honestly. I would rather see something hinged personally, and I don't know if this style of canopy fits with what else is going on downtown in terms of its character and the degree of extension. I'm imagining all the storefronts with a canopy like this, and I can't say that would be a great experience walking down Main Street, just for me. So that's kind of where I'm at.
I would agree that if they all did that, that wouldn't quite feel right. But I think breaking up some of the tradition with a little bit of trend forward modern flair here and there almost enhances the rest of the more architectural parts. With this area being kind of recessed and where the street kind of protrudes, I think in this case it makes a great fit, and good that we look at these case by case.
I really like the garage door going along with what everybody else said. Can I ask you if you'd thought about what the other cafes down there have, at least a couple of them, I think Whiskey Road does it, with tables and umbrellas and that kind of stuff, and why that may not work for you guys? Okay.
to Brad's concern, has there been any thought given to the, to the number of restaurants that have outdoor cafe? And if this kind of set a precedent where they all wanted to do the same thing, how would that look and feel? And maybe part of that, is there anything about the awning or the retractable awning that is not permitted specifically? It's, there's no rule bending or anything like that. I didn't quite clearly understand.
So the code specifically talks about overhanging, the literal language in the code talks about projections over the sidewalk, but only really specifies signage and how projecting signs can only come 5 foot out or halfway, half the width of the sidewalk. Awnings don't have specific language, but it's been staff practice to implement it the same way, just because you want that clearance and walkability of other, movement of pedestrians in that area. But that's why there is some gray area here, and it would be the first of its type, so it would set precedent too for future ones. So, but there aren't very many areas in the parquet that come out that far.
Right.
So I think of it, having this situation happen so often may not be a real concern, because I don't think there's really an opportunity in many places for it.
Okay.
And the sidewalk cafe requirements have their own, there's I think certain aisle widths that people have to walk through, and safety regulations and those type of things. So if anything, they would have to follow those standards too. And I can't speak to how, because the planning staff, we don't grant sidewalk cafe permits. It's the admin staff. They also do the liquor licenses and those type of things. And I think as long as any business meets the general distance requirements, they can get it. I don't think there's a limit on percentage or certain spacings between, how many on a block or anything like that.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
So I think just to add to what Ira said, the concern about any projection, the reason that any projection over the public right-of-way comes through the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council is because it's using public property, basically extending over the public property. And our role here is to make sure that it's of a quality and structure and it's mounted appropriately so that it's safe and appropriate to hang over the street. And so that's why we put the stipulation in here that we really haven't seen the specifications, particularly for this, and the quality of that and how that's going to exactly be mounted to the storefront facade. We know that there's some EFS that was installed in the 2007 redo of the building, and so that's not a particularly sturdy material. So we'd want to look. The building official will look at structurally how that's going to be mounted to make sure that it's safe. So I think as far as the retractability of that, traditional storefronts did have pretty big awnings that extended out over and they would retract them and pull them in and out based on where the sun was and to shade the goods in the window and to provide weather protection and that sort of thing. So, it is historical, some precedent there for traditional storefronts to do that. But I think all that cautionary about the quality and the structure of it and making sure that it doesn't impede public movement and that sort of thing.
I would move to approve with the change of making it a single garage door.
I'll second.
All right, well, let's vote. Hold on, let's vote again. All right, we have 6 ayes, so that item passes on to council. With that, I will give it back to you.
All right, thanks, Brad. Our last item of new business is Panther West preliminary plat, and I think, Brian, you were...
I'll be abstaining from this item.
Yeah, just want to note that Winger is abstaining on this item, and Iris, it's back to you, right?
Yes, thank you. So Panther Farms LLC is proposing to subdivide approximately 40 acres of land in a R1 zoned residence district with the intent to develop 98 new residential lots that would be similar to the neighboring subdivisions of Prairie West and Prairie Winds. The 40 acres under consideration are located directly north of the Aldrich Elementary School and south of the University Avenue and West Green Hill Road intersection. Tonight's presentation of this preliminary plat is an introduction of the project to the commission and to the public. So this time, just looking to cover some of the basics of the plat and get some general feedback and direction from the commission before it comes back for consideration and a vote. Here's an excerpt of the proposed Panther West subdivision. As noted previously, the applicant is proposing to create 98 new residential lots in this development. All of these proposed lots do meet the minimum zoning code requirements. So in terms of lot size, width, those type of details, or exceed. A few of them are quite wide. And they are consistent with the R1 zoning district requirements as well. The applicant is proposing 4 phases of this development outlined on this slide. I have them color-coded and also by the number of lots per each. And I think the 2 blues are similar, but I hope, can you tell them apart enough where you can kind of see them? I'll go through those really quick. So the first phase is the first north kind of eastern section of the plat, and that would be of the first 38 lots. And that would include kind of a northern leg of Arbors Drive, and then a connection to the neighboring subdivision there to the east. The second phase would be shown in, I guess it's more of an aqua on this, in this PowerPoint to the south. And basically what it is, it's the continuation of Arbors Drive to the south to make that needed connection to Aldrich Elementary School. And I'll talk a little bit about that connection later. And that phase would create 19 lots. The third phase would then connect the little kind of corner between the 1 and 2 on the southeastern corner, shown in yellow. That would create 19 lots. And the last phase, we just kind of close it off for 22 lots, shown in orange on the west side of the plat. The proposed plan does coordinate the development of these buildable lots with the installation of utilities, public services, and streets in an orderly manner, and we have coordinated with them in that on the order, so with staff. This subdivision includes, as I'd mentioned, an extension of Arbors Drive, which is essential for overall neighborhood traffic circulation for the Winds and Wests, and not only that, but also access to Aldrich Elementary School to the south. I'd like to note that reviewing street connections in subdivisions is critical for traffic circulation and general health of neighborhoods. Staff has worked closely with developers on this layout. Generally, we'd like to see more than one connection to the boundaries, but due to the specific location of this and the existing infrastructure already in place, for this reason, you really only see one connection. And then the only really area we had any potential creativity with was on the west side, but the river, the floodway, goes right along that north western section of the plat. So there really isn't, it didn't really make sense to connect it that way since there'd be nothing there but floodway. So that's why you see that one connection to the south. But this plan has thought through connection and traffic circulation through this community and through others. I'd also like to note that, again, because the Aldrich Elementary School is to the south and that connection is needed, and to meet plat requirements of access to these lots, there is a preliminary platted subdivision to the northeast of this development. That would be that remaining connection of Arbors to I believe it's West Green Hill Road there. So we have made it a stipulation of approval for the final plat that road be in place at that time, either before or consecutively, to ensure that connection for both the safety and just access of the community. So just to note that the final plat for this one may not come forward until that subdivision is ready as well. There are a number of sidewalk connections as well throughout this plat. There is a trail that runs on the east side of Arbors Way, and that'll continue throughout this development. And then just a note, because there isn't really much street connectivity as much as we would like, the applicant has provided an additional kind of sidewalk access to the newly proposed subdivision to the northeast, and that will help with the circulation within the neighborhood, but also kind of help hopefully children and families, maybe traveling through not the major roads to get to and from the school. So it'll be safer for everybody, and just trying again to help promote connectivity and walkability throughout the neighborhood. So that was a nice addition there to help kind of compensate for the lack of street connections. There's also a note that there is a traffic circle that is being proposed at the intersection of Madeline and Arbors Drive. And the purpose for that is due to the layout of the subdivision. It wasn't possible to do a perpendicular access point, and that creates safety issues in terms of vision and those type of elements. So a traffic circle was placed there to help with that, as well as a method for traffic calming for cars going into the school to the south. So kind of a dual purpose element there. However, this is a relatively new addition based on our comments, so our engineering staff is still reviewing this. At first look, it looks like it meets all the requirements, but they're still waiting for a final review, so that may change a little bit when you see it next time. In terms of stormwater, this is also still being reviewed by engineering. It's been recently brought to our attention that actually the major basin to the north of this subdivision is actually owned by the U.S. Army Corps. So we have to bring them into the discussion as well. And so we've been working with them, and engineering's been re-reviewing the requirements. It triggers different types of criteria. So currently the plat proposes 2 basins where basically the water will funnel to the north into these, and then into the basin, I guess the floodway to the north of that. Again, this is being reviewed, and there may be some changes as well in the future. So any changes that are needed by the Army Corps or by us when engineering finishes their review will be required to be shown here and updated, both the plat and the stormwater management plan, so any calculations, and that will be required before coming back to you for final review, because it may change the layout of the plat too. So just a heads up on that. So again, in general, this is just an introduction of the plat. There's still a number of items that need to be addressed and some technical comments that we're working on together. But again, just wanted to bring it to your attention and open it up toward general comments and discussion so that we're ready to come forward at the next meeting with a final proposal.
Thank you, Iris. Anybody representing the applicant that would like to share any information? If there are questions, okay. Well, commission, questions, discussion? This is a discussion item for tonight, so we won't be taking any action.
So I have a question. Did you state that on the northeast corner that has to be platted before you'll let them do this plat so they can connect to Green Hill Road?
At the same time or before.
At the same time, okay.
So that, just to clarify, that land has already been preliminary platted, and a preliminary plat has been approved, so that's actually a little ahead of this area, so.
Then I have a second question, because Arbor Drive is not a part of the first phase, so that will not be done either, right?
So like a third of it is part of the first phase, and that's more.
But not connecting to the school, right, okay.
I would be curious about additional traffic calming measures that could be taken. Just knowing how Eric Road has really become a very fast-moving traffic pattern for people going to school. They put in additional crosswalks. Just curious if there would be anything like that here.
There, good evening. Drosky with CGA Engineers. As Iris said, thanks for that good, robust review, but there are some minor changes to be had. We did add in a traffic calming circle, and I think that there's some space available if that's going to be a requirement of approval, that's something that we can talk with city staff going forward. I'll have to run that by the development group, of course, but if there's room available, That's certainly an option that we could talk about.
Good deal.
One other question. You probably don't know the answer to this, but do you have a sense of the timing of these phases?
I don't right now. When we meet again in a few weeks, when this comes back, I'd be happy to provide a very specific timeline of that. Standing here right now, I'm not sure what the development group is planning as far as, I don't want to say this fall versus next spring and tell you something that's not accurate.
Sure.
I have one other question, not to the applicant, but to staff. The road in front of the school is not a normal street. It's very narrow. Is that going to be changed? It's not on this property, but it's just concerning to me if we're going to make them do all this road work on their development. What about the actual road that goes to the school, which is very narrow?
So that has a median in it, is designed as a boulevard in front of the school.
But the road itself is very
The
narrow.
lanes are a little bit narrower than what's comfortable.
It's very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So my question is,
Continue through here.
I know, it's not part of this plat, but that concerns me a lot. So that's very narrow, and then we widen out, so it's just,
Some of that's intended to slow people down.
okay.
So note on that, so what they did in this case, just to transition from it, it's not quite answering your question, but just kind of adding
Sure.
to. So what they did is they took that kind of boulevard width as well as the sidewalk width trails and then narrowed it down when it met to Madeline and then kind of went to a normal width at that point. So that kind of configuration does continue for a little bit on this plat, just so it can transition smoothly into the rest of it.
Okay.
And that's the right-of-way width, not the pavement width of the street. So the
Right.
pavement width of the street will meet city standards of 31-foot wide pavement width for when it enters this subdivision. Doesn't have a median, in other words.
Okay.
Other questions or discussion?
It's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
Looks good.
I think we got what we need, so we'll wait to see what comes back for action likely next meeting then, right? That completes our new business. Is there any commission updates for tonight?
Just one minor thing. I know that Leslie donated her book back to me that we always give out to all the commissioners when they go on the commission, a packet of information during your orientation that kind of gives some highlights of conflict of interest and ex parte communication and a copy of the zoning ordinance and comprehensive plan and that sort of thing. So I'm sure many of you have been on the commission for some time and maybe all of that needs to be updated. So Leslie, since she was the most recent commissioner, I had her give her book back because it had the latest materials and want to make sure that everybody can get the same materials. So hopefully next time at your meeting, we'll have everything ready for you and then you can put some new materials into your binders and review those materials again, just to make sure that you're up to date on everything.
Okay. Thank you, Karen. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.